A man accidentally unearthed a pink diamond, a true masterpiece whose size and color were enough to shake the world. As a slave, Solomon desperately wanted to keep it. But just recently, a fellow worker was caught trying to hide a small rice grain-sized diamond in his mouth and was shot dead on the spot. Where could such a large diamond be hidden? In that moment, Solomon's heart began to pound faster, his eyes darting around. Just then, a loud explosion echoed, a nearby water pump exploding. The blast drew everyone's attention. Solomon quickly seized the opportunity, bending down to hide the diamond between his toes. Afterwards, he made an excuse to go to the latrine, making a swift exit. Unbeknownst to him, the rebel commander still noticed Solomon's suspicious behavior. He immediately blocked his path. Fortunately, the diamond was hidden under his foot. Even after a thorough search, nothing unusual was found. However, when Solomon reached a secluded spot, preparing to rehide the diamond, a cold gun barrel pressed against his head. It turned out the commander, unwilling to give up, had secretly followed him. Just as Solomon was about to surrender the diamond, fate smiled upon him once more. Government forces unexpectedly attacked, a bomb falling right next to the two men. The rebel commander was severely wounded on the spot, while Solomon took the chance to flee. He then went to a dry tree and buried the diamond. Immediately after, he was captured by government troops. Upon arriving at the prison, Solomon encountered the rebel commander again. It turned out he hadn't died, only suffered an eye injury. Nevertheless, he recognized Solomon instantly and yelled loudly in front of everyone, "This brat has a priceless pink diamond. Whoever finds it will be handsomely rewarded." Everyone began to look at Solomon with greedy eyes. To protect himself, he vehemently denied it, even stripping off all his clothes to prove his innocence. Although this method might deter small fry, it couldn't fool Danny Archer. Danny Archer was a white man born and raised in Africa, an unscrupulous black market diamond dealer. Wherever there were diamonds, his shadow loomed. However, this was a dangerous profession. A slight misstep could cost him his life. But with vast experience, Danny had honed shrewd skills. He could not only identify and prevent robberies, but also successfully smuggle illicit goods. That day, Danny easily acquired a new batch of diamonds. To transport them to a neighboring country for sale, he disguised himself as a magazine reporter and hired local shepherds as cover. The diamond was sewn under the skin of one of the sheep. But what he didn't expect was that this never-failing individual would stumble this time. Seeing himself caught on the spot, Danny had no choice but to invoke Colonel Cozier, the leader of Africa's largest mercenary army. Cozier was well known throughout the region, but the opposing side showed no respect and immediately threw Danny into prison. Yet it was precisely because of this that Danny luckily learned Solomon possessed a rare pink diamond. Therefore, after being bailed out by his associates, he immediately reported this news to them, instructing them to rescue Solomon at all costs. With years of experience in diamond trading, Danny understood the value of that pink diamond far better than Solomon. Once he obtained it, he could not only achieve financial freedom, but also escape Cozier's control and leave Africa entirely. After giving all instructions, Danny returned to his hotel. As he stepped through the door, he used a dagger to pry out one of his teeth. Inside was a hidden diamond. Clearly, he would only retrieve it when absolutely desperate. However, while Danny was out exchanging money, a man had stealthily entered his room. At the same time, his associates had bailed Solomon out of prison and given him some money before he left, to prevent him from being rearrested due to poverty. Solomon was completely bewildered and didn't dwell on it, as his sole desire at that moment was to quickly find his family. It turned out that Solomon was once just an ordinary fisherman, raising 3 children with his loving wife. Although their life was simple, it wasn't peaceful. His son, Dia, was particularly obedient, understanding, and eager to learn. Every day he would wake up on time and walk 5 kilometers through the mountains to school. But that day, as Solomon picked his son up from school, they suddenly encountered a group of armed rebels. These individuals were cruel, bloodthirsty, and inhumane. Upon entering the village, they immediately began indiscriminately firing at civilians, including many children. They didn't even flinch when killing. In the chaos, Solomon successfully helped his wife and children escape, but he himself was captured on the spot. Initially, he was to have an arm chopped off, but the enemy, seeing his strength and robust physique, had a change of heart and instead tied him to the diamond mine for forced labor. The scene at the beginning of the story then unfolded. Elsewhere, after exchanging his money, Danny went to a bar, but his purpose wasn't to revel. It was to find the owner and order a handgun. Just then, the beauty of Meddy Bowen caught his attention. Initially, Danny only intended to find a woman for the night, but unexpectedly, after talking for a while, he discovered she was a reporter and immediately guessed he was a diamond smuggler. Danny detested getting involved with the press, but Mehdi clung to him, demanding information to expose the blood diamond trade network and the biggest smuggler behind it. However, no matter how much Danny liked beautiful women, he would never reveal any information to a stranger reporter. So the two parted ways unhappily. Returning to his hotel, seeing his room ransacked, Danny immediately realized his associates had secretly tipped off Colonel Cozier about the pink diamond. Though he understood that in this man-eating land, trust was the cheapest commodity, he couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. The intruder, after finding nothing in his room, also revealed himself. The two were on the same side, seemingly conversing normally, but each had their own agenda. Danny decided to confront the colonel, expose everything, and punch him squarely in the face to vent his frustration. Not long after, Danny was invited by the colonel to his estate for tea. As the biggest mercenary warlord in Africa, the colonel not only trafficked diamonds but also helped the government suppress rebels, essentially profiting handsomely from the war. How could such a money-driven individual who cared for no one overlook a rare pink diamond? So, he issued a stern order, demanding Danny obtain the diamond for him. Success would mean all previous business debts were forgiven. At the same time, he was well aware of Danny's ambition. Knowing he wanted to escape Africa, he picked up a handful of red earth, patted it, and said, "This is your home. You will never leave Africa." Danny, who had followed the colonel since childhood, understood his ruthlessness and brutality. He could only curb his sharpness and wholeheartedly deal with Solomon. But at this moment, Solomon trusted no one. He stubbornly insisted he had never seen a large pink diamond. Helpless, Danny had to bide his time. That evening, he returned to the bar. The owner gave him the ordered gun and also offered a piece of news. The rebels would attack tomorrow, kindly advising him to leave early to save his life. Just then, Danny saw Mehdi again. Surprisingly, the two, who had parted unhappily last time, were now clinging to each other like new lovers who had been separated. The only difference was that one desired physical intimacy, while the other only sought to gather smuggling information. However, even in the most ambiguous atmosphere, neither fell for the other's trap. Impatient, Mehdi immediately went on the offensive, saying she had met too many people who valued money over human lives. Hearing this, Danny lost interest. When he went to the bar to order a drink, Mehdi refused to give up and followed him. At this point, Danny no longer held back and retorted, "Do you think you're so noble that you can change Africa? In fact, you're also a member of that blood diamond crowd. If it weren't for American girls like you always dreaming of a fairy tale wedding with a sparkling stone, these diamonds wouldn't be so valuable, and no one would risk everything to smuggle them." But Mehdi countered, "Not every American girl wants a fairy tale wedding, just like not every African lives by massacring each other. In reality, good people do good things every day, but clearly none of them are done by you." So, the two once again parted unhappily. The next day, the rebels indeed entered the city. The area was about to be engulfed in the flames of war. Danny seized the opportunity to find Solomon, hoping to persuade him to cooperate. At this point, the pink diamond was a deadly burden. Solomon had no means of selling it. Danny emphasized his connections and role, but Solomon was still solely focused on finding his family. Seeing this, Danny immediately said, "Without me, you'll be even less able to change your fate and find your wife and children." Just as the two were fiercely arguing, the rebels unexpectedly launched a widespread attack. Amidst the chaotic escape, Danny continued to persuade, and Solomon, trembling, finally agreed to cooperate. At this moment, government forces had already engaged the rebels. They completely disregarded civilian lives. Fortunately, Danny was an experienced mercenary. He led Solomon through the hail of bullets, fleeing to a relatively safe ruin. By nightfall, the two used the darkness to reach the city's only exit, but there were 3 rebel soldiers guarding it. Escaping meant taking a significant risk. So Danny told Solomon to pretend to be a rebel soldier while he would pose as a captured prisoner. When the enemy's guard was down, Danny immediately drew his gun and shot the guards dead, not forgetting to add 2 more shots for good measure. Next, he picked up a rebel sniper rifle and shot the fleeing rebel soldier in the distance. This scene made Solomon realize Danny's brutality. Afterward, the two blended in with the refugees, arriving at a government-run refugee camp. There, Danny met a male reporter and through him found Mehdi. As soon as they met, Danny said, "I can provide you with information. But in return, you have to use your authority to access the UN database and help Solomon find his family. Danny did this because he knew that to get the pink diamond, he first had to resolve Solomon's situation. And the only way to do that was to help him find his family. Although Mehdi knew she was being used, and also knew Solomon was certainly linked to the diamond, for a petty individual who only cared about profit could not be so generous as to help a black fisherman. But as a righteous reporter, as long as it meant saving lives, she disregarded other matters. Very quickly, Mehdi found information about Solomon's family. They were currently in a refugee camp in neighboring Guinea, but when they arrived by helicopter, they discovered the number of refugees there exceeded 1 million. Finding family members was indeed not easy. Fortunately, heaven still showed mercy to this unfortunate man. Solomon quickly spotted his wife and daughter. However, his son, Dia, had been taken by the rebels. This completely devastated Solomon, as he had witnessed firsthand the cruelty of children trained as soldiers and knew the rebels would surely turn Dia into one of them. And his prediction, indeed, came true. At this point, Dia had been trained by the one-eyed commander into a killing machine. When massacring villagers, the boy showed no emotion and always charged ahead. Worse still, fearing refugees might join the rebels, the authorities declared they would only release Solomon's wife and children after the war ended. Empty-handed, Solomon was like a lost soul. Every day, he mechanically mumbled his son's name. Danny, on the other hand, was clearly only interested in the diamond. After learning where Solomon had buried the pink diamond, he focused all his energy on how to dig it up. But the terrain was complex, and there were many entrenched factions. The only chance was to infiltrate Mehdi's team. But at this moment, Mehdi was deeply troubled. Graduating from a prestigious school, she was intelligent and quick-witted, capable of living a wealthy life in New York. But she carried a strong messianic ideal, always wanting to eliminate injustice in the world. But no matter how touching her articles were, or how realistic her photographs, at most, they only drew a few tears from readers, and fundamentally couldn't change the suffering in Africa. She no longer wanted to continue like this, but wanted to use concrete evidence to overthrow the individuals behind the blood diamond trade. Perhaps moved by Mehdi's actions, or perhaps simply wanting to obtain the pink diamond, Danny revealed the entire truth about the blood diamond supply chain. He smuggled diamonds to neighboring countries. Then, local buyers would deliver the diamonds to intermediaries. When the intermediaries bribed customs, they could prove these diamonds were mined domestically, thereby allowing them to be legally exported. And the mastermind behind this chain of interests was Van de Kaap. On one hand, he stockpiled large quantities of diamonds to control supply and maintain high prices. On the other hand, he sought every means to prolong the war, preventing diamonds from directly flowing into the market from rebel hands. After speaking, Danny also promised to provide direct evidence, but these details would only be publicly reported once he obtained the pink diamond. Otherwise, he would surely die without a burial place. Thus, the two reached a cooperative agreement. Danny and Solomon also disguised themselves as staff, blending into Mehdi's team. But just on their way to the destination, the entire group was suddenly attacked by rebels. In the critical situation, the kind-hearted Solomon saved a child. But because the bus had no more space, the others could only get on another small truck. Unexpectedly, misfortune brought good luck. Everyone on the bus was annihilated by the rebels, while they took the opportunity to drive into the jungle and escape. Unexpectedly, having just escaped one danger, they encountered local guerrillas. Fortunately, these individuals did not have a habit of indiscriminate killing. After some gesturing and Mehdi taking photos, they quickly lowered their guard and even led the three to a hidden estate. Compared to war-torn Africa, this place was truly a paradise. The children here had all been child soldiers previously, but under dedicated teaching and loving care, they had returned to their innate innocence. All of this was thanks to the estate's owner. He always believed that people did not possess true good or evil distinctions. Even the most heinous villains, in a moment of goodwill, could make life more meaningful. Danny pondered these words. That evening he heard the children singing, and under the influence of palm wine, he confessed his heart to Mehdi for the first time. It turned out Danny was a white man born in Africa. When he was 9, his mother was killed, and his father was beheaded. It could be said that war had taken everything from him. So, at 19, he followed the colonel, becoming a mercenary, fighting against black people. But later, he realized it wasn't about peace, and certainly not about eradicating racial hatred, but only about money and profit. From then on, he decided to fight alone, becoming a selfish smuggler. But now he only wanted to live a peaceful life, and that pink diamond was his ticket out of Africa. Seeing Danny's face gradually filled with pain, Mehdi instinctively held his hand. The hearts of the two slowly drew closer from that moment. The next day, the estate owner led the three towards their destination. But on the way, they encountered a child soldier unit of the rebels. With his good intentions, he thought he could use words to reason with them, but unexpectedly, the hardened and emotionless rebels immediately responded with gunfire. Seeing this, Danny quickly drew his gun to threaten them. While the children were startled by him, he stepped on the gas and fled. Just then, the colonel's camp was nearby. To save the severely wounded estate owner, Danny had no choice but to divert towards the camp. The good news was that the estate owner still had a chance to survive, and Mehdi could also retreat with the refugees. But the bad news was that the colonel was about to personally lead his troops to Kono, their destination, to quell the rebellion, and demanded Danny accompany him to find the pink diamond. But Danny knew well that once he followed a large army, he probably wouldn't even find diamond dust. So, after leaving the tent, he immediately asked Mehdi for help, luring away the guards near the ammunition depot so he could sneak in, steal weapons, and lead Solomon himself. Hearing this, Mehdi immediately understood Danny's intention and knew this trip would surely be more dangerous than not, but she could only nod in agreement through tears. Danny also handed over the evidence he had so that even if he truly died in Kono, Mehdi could expose the whole truth. Afterward, with Mehdi's help, Danny successfully obtained weapons and the two were about to part ways. In fact, through so many hardships and sincere sharing, they had developed feelings for each other. But this separation might be forever. However, in this land, apart from love, they each had their own paths to tread, their own destinies to accept. Before leaving, Mehdi not only took a commemorative photo, but also proactively gave Danny her office number, home number, and cell phone number. Previously, others had pursued her, but this time she was willing to break the rule and take the initiative. After parting ways, both set off to pursue their destinies. Along the way, Danny and Solomon talked about the details of the pink diamond. When Solomon learned the diamond was worth at least 100 carats, his previously heavy steps inadvertently became lighter, as if the diamond and freedom were right before his eyes. But that very night, disaster struck again. As a rebel military vehicle roared past, Solomon glimpsed his son Dia inside. In his eagerness to find his son, he made a noise, almost getting both of them chased to their deaths by the rebels. After their narrow escape, Danny, unable to control his anger, even pulled out a knife and threatened Solomon. "If you cause any more trouble, I'll skin you alive." But in Solomon's heart, the pink diamond was not as precious as his son. Therefore, despite the threat, he still wanted to find his son first. The two had a fierce argument and scuffle because of this, but Solomon maintained his stubborn stance. Helpless, Danny had to compromise. That evening, the two stealthily entered the rebel camp but couldn't find any trace of Dia. They had no choice but to continue their journey. Previously, on their way, they often talked about diamonds, but now they began to talk about each other's lives and gradually truly opened up to each other. Danny even said he would definitely rescue Dia. After walking for another day and night on a small road, the two finally reached the mining area where the pink diamond was buried, but the area was heavily guarded and impossible to approach. Helpless, Danny had to resort to a desperate measure, sending the exact coordinates to the colonel, asking him to use strong firepower to clear the way. Danny knew this was a risky move, but there was no better alternative. He could only hope to sneak to the diamond's location during the exchange of fire, dig it up, and then seize the opportunity to escape. But Solomon felt something was amiss upon hearing this, for he was certain his son was inside, and once the firing started, his son's life could be lost. So that evening, while Danny was asleep, he secretly infiltrated the enemy area and found his son. Unexpectedly, his son not only didn't recognize him, but also considered him a traitor and arrested him. Just then, Danny discovered Solomon's disappearance and followed him there. But faced with this situation, he could only wait for the right moment. Early the next morning, the wounded rebel commander appeared. Seeing Solomon, he was overjoyed, using Dia to threaten him into surrendering the pink diamond. The reason the commander so desperately craved this diamond was that he, like Danny, wanted to use the money to escape this living hell. Faced with the threat, Solomon prepared to surrender, while Danny, hidden in the shadows, was anxious, fearing the pink diamond would be snatched away first. Just then, the colonel's helicopter arrived just in time. Under the hail of bullets and bombs, the rebels immediately disintegrated. Despite the chaotic situation, Danny's mind remained very clear. He knew he had to focus on protecting Dia, as that was the only way to get Solomon to reveal the diamond's hiding place. So, despite risking his life, he saved Dia. Solomon, on the other side, finally found an opportunity for revenge. He directly used an iron bar to smash the one-eyed commander's head. With overwhelming firepower, the rebels were quickly completely wiped out. At this point, everyone's focus once again shifted to Solomon, and Solomon knew the pink diamond's location was his life card, so he stubbornly refused to speak. It wasn't until the colonel said that if Danny could make him talk, he would agree to a 4-6 split, otherwise both would die, that Danny pulled Dia aside. Once again, having his weakness exploited, Solomon had no choice but to compromise. Afterward, the group went to the burial site. The area had already been ransacked by the rebels. Solomon had to force himself to continue digging. At this point, both Danny and Solomon understood clearly. Once the diamond was retrieved, neither of their lives would likely be spared. Danny suddenly asked the person next to him for a cigarette but was refused. He then said meaningfully, "Anyway, I was planning to quit smoking, right, Solomon?" Solomon immediately understood his hint. Because on the way to the mine, Danny had said that smoking would reduce stamina, and if he successfully obtained the diamond, he would quit immediately. Solomon trusted Danny more and was willing to risk finding a way to survive with him. So, he pretended to dig up the diamond, attracting everyone's attention. Danny seized the opportunity to quickly kill a soldier. Solomon also took advantage of the chaos to attack the colonel next to him. The colonel reacted immediately, firing back. Danny, seeing this, quickly hid in the forest, then suddenly turned back and finished off the colonel. Very quickly after, Solomon truly dug up the diamond. However, during the recent firefight, Danny's abdomen unfortunately took a bullet. But to avoid being pursued by the colonel's men, they had to quickly escape with the diamond. Unexpectedly, Dia held a gun and blocked their path. It wasn't until Solomon poured out his heartfelt emotions that his son, whose conscience was not yet entirely lost, regained his senses. However, just as the father-son reunion ended, all three were attacked and had no choice but to quickly flee. On the way, Danny demanded the diamond back, and at the same time contacted his associates in advance to arrange a plane for pickup. But the landing point was the mountain peak ahead. They had to traverse 10 kilometers of high mountain road to reach it. Hearing Danny's heavy breathing, Solomon advised him to stop and rest, but the enemy could catch up at any moment from behind. Stopping could very well mean death, so he could only try his best to race against time. However, halfway up the slope, Danny was completely exhausted. Solomon decisively carried him on his back and continued. But not long after, Danny was completely spent. He knew he wouldn't live much longer and pulled out the pale pink stone. This was what he had risked his life for, but he no longer had the chance to spend it. Although he understood the principle of people dying for money, success being so close still filled him with a hint of regret. However, in the end, he decided to give the stone to Solomon. Not only that, he also gave Solomon Medi's business card, telling him to call her for help when he reached the capital. In addition, he gave Solomon a gun and specifically warned him never to trust his associates. Solomon wanted to carry him, but Danny told him to quickly take his son home. Just then, the enemy caught up. To buy time for Solomon to escape, Danny single-handedly took up his gun and began to counterattack. Only when he saw Solomon and his son far away did he stop and let out a sigh of relief. Then, he used a satellite phone to call Medi, telling her to pick up Solomon and his son at all costs. Initially, Medi was very happy to receive the call, but hearing the increasingly heavy breathing on the other end, Medi felt something was wrong, and her heart sank. At this moment, the helicopter of his associates roared overhead, but Danny no longer felt regret, only marveling, "The scenery here is truly beautiful. I wish you were here too." But luckily he had told her the true story, so now she could freely write her articles. At this point, Medi also understood the meaning behind Danny's words. She cried and said, "I wish I could be with you." But Danny said it was okay. He was exactly where he should be. After hanging up, Danny gripped the blood-stained earth beside him. It seemed to confirm the colonel's words. This was his destiny. Though he had tried his best to escape, he was ultimately born and died in this place. In the brilliant sunset, Danny Archer closed his eyes, becoming the brightest streak of white in this dark land. Not long after, with Medi's help, Solomon brought the pink diamond to London, and under Medi's meticulous arrangements, he reached a transaction agreement with the high-ranking officials of the Diamond Monopoly Corporation. The accompanying condition was assistance in finding his family. Thus, Solomon's family was finally reunited, and the transaction scene was entirely filmed by Medi. Afterward, Medi, armed with the evidence she possessed, exposed the dark secrets behind the blood diamond trade. Solomon also stood up and testified, telling the whole world the bloody stories that had occurred in Africa. Finally, in May 2003, 40 countries signed the Kimberley Process Certification Scheme. Any diamond legally mined from its origin must be packaged in loss-resistant containers and accompanied by a Kimberley certificate to be allowed for export. Otherwise, diamonds of unknown origin are prohibited. Blood Diamond is a drama film directed by Edward Zwick, starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Djimon Hounsou, released in 2006. Danny, though white, had lived in unstable Africa since birth. In the 1990s, not only was there continuous warfare, but illegal diamond trading was also rampant. Millions of local civilians lost their lives because of this. Danny made a living as a diamond smuggler, but he had long wanted to escape this war-torn land. Unfortunately, he never had enough money. Therefore, upon hearing about the rare large pink diamond, he sought every means to approach Solomon, its owner. Ultimately, he succeeded in obtaining the diamond but died on his way back due to severe injuries. However, in the short time he spent with Solomon, after helping Solomon find his family, and after hearing the aspirations and ideals of the female reporter Mehdi, he transformed from a selfish, unscrupulous individual into an ordinary person capable of feeling warmth and love. Therefore, in the final moments of his life, he voluntarily returned the diamond to Solomon. Solomon, in turn, did not keep it for himself, but, under Mehdi's meticulous arrangements, completed an illegal transaction with the Diamond Monopoly Company. Afterwards, based on this transaction record and the evidence Danny provided before his death, along with Mehdi, they exposed the truth behind the blood diamond trade in Sierra Leone. Diamonds are inherently just ordinary transparent stones, but due to human greed and the pursuit of material possessions, they have become symbols of purity, nobility, and even wealth and power. And to obtain more profit, the evil within human nature is continuously exposed, leading to exploitation and bloodshed. Although international agreements can slow down or even stop the illegal diamond trade, there is no way to curb human greed. Advising people to stop buying a certain illicit commodity cannot reduce it either, because the venomous snake called ambition still lurks in the human heart. The satisfaction that cannot be obtained from diamonds will surely be sought through other avenues, either other luxury goods or other immoral behaviors. Therefore, we do not need to boycott a material object that is neither right nor wrong, but rather to recognize the relationship between ourselves and the world, to regulate another relationship. Regulate our own desires, regulate our own hypocrisy, and regulate our own conscience. Because what is stained with blood has never been the diamond, but human greed and ever-expanding desires. The value of a film lies in its reputation, while the value of a film review lies in its sentiment. Today's story ends here. Thank you for watching. What do you think of this film? Please comment below.